I was on the top deck of a bus going home one day after work, and I remember thinking quite explicitly that I didn't want to get to 40 and wonder what my life would have been like if I'd gone to drama school. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Not a Straight Line, a podcast where we look to explore in depth the zigs and zags of guests' non-straight line journey through life to shatter the myths of success and failure. Now, this episode is a slightly different one to normal in that it is my non-straight line journey through life that we're going to explore. And to get a bit of a helping hand with that, I've invited my dear friend Rob Drummond onto this episode. Rob is a writer, he's a storyteller, he's a consummate podcaster in his own right. And I'm prepared to bare my soul to him so that you, dear listener, can get a chance to kind of share, I guess, in a way, a little bit of my journey through life. And I'm hoping that as a result of it, you'll get to know me a little bit more and maybe even trust me a little bit more. I don't know. We'll see. So Rob, over to you. And just, be gentle. You don't have to come out the gate with all guns blazing with a killer question, but if you want to as well, that's absolutely fine.
There are no
Right, I'm
gentle
in your
openings,
hands.
Pete. There's no gentle
You
openings. We like to go deep straight away. So
as they as they say in the Royal Air Force, you have control.
perfect. Well, I would like to jump in deep straight away if you're willing, if you're
Mhm.
comfortable to do so. I'd like you to think about and maybe share a story of as you think about your life and the main turning points that have led you to where you are today. If you had to pick one of those turning points, which was like the biggest zag or the biggest surprise to you, or the one, where the stakes felt really high at the time? Perhaps we can start there.
Yeah, it's a great question, and knowing you as I do, it doesn't surprise me that you started there. I know what came to mind immediately, but I think if I just jump straight in there and talk about that specific moment, I know you have a thing about 5 second moments, which we could perhaps unpack a little bit later. But just a little bit of context for this 5 second moment, if you like, is I had two loves growing up. I was into computers and I was into acting. And when I say into computers, I mean, bearing in mind that I've been around the sun 55 times. So computers when I was growing up are not like the computers that we're using now. You basically had to program it yourself on a tape recorder. And there are some older folks around this virtual podcast room who might recognize that. But the acting as well, I was always involved in school plays and, just loved that sense of being able to be somebody else. And I think partly as I reflect back on my life, one of the reasons for that, I suspect, is I've recently been diagnosed with ADHD. And in kind of exploring that and all of that meant to me in terms of growing up, I recognize that for most of my childhood, I was basically told off for being who I was. And if not punished, then certainly encouraged to be different. And I guess on stage, I was able to be whoever I wanted to be. Anyway, I've specialized in computers post-school. I actually spent a year traveling around Australia before I went to college. Studied computers, went back to Hong Kong. I was brought up in Hong Kong, so went back there to work after college and jumped straight back into the amateur, or straight back in, I had never been before, but jumped straight into the amateur theatre scene in Hong Kong. Got involved in a few companies. So when I would do a production with one, and when that finished, I would then do another one. And I remember being on the bus when we're coming up to the 5 second moment now. I was on the top deck of a bus going home one day after work. And I remember thinking quite explicitly that I didn't want to get to 40 and wonder what my life would have been like if I'd gone to drama school. And I thought the only way that I can mitigate that future regret, if you like, is to do something about it. So from Hong Kong, I sent in a self-tape. Nowadays, the world of acting, it's all about self-tapes. You do auditions at home and you send your tapes in. But this was literally a tape, it's VHS recorder. And I sent that off. And luckily I got into drama school and then my life zagged. That was then I went off the computer straight line to a successful IT career, and I zagged to the life of a professional actor. Yeah.
I think being on a bus gives you space to think about these things. And I think you need that space in the moment to actually make those choices, perhaps.
I think you need that. It's a good insight. I think without space somewhere in your life regularly, I think it's impossible to kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, to course correct, I guess, at a sense, or kind of just tap into yourself and make sure that you're being true to who you are. So yeah, bus journeys and car journeys, really, even to that extent. But that was definitely a zag for me, which then led to, half a decade or so of being a professional actor. And listen, when you're in work as an actor, it is the best job in the world. It really is. I traveled the UK. I did a national tour. I was in the West End. I don't know what the equivalent in Australia is. In the US, it would be Broadway. I was in a play there. I did a tour of primary schools all around the UK. But the challenge, of course, is that the work is off and on, and for me, it was it was more off than it was on, and then that kind of, I slid then back into my fallback, yeah, the IT.
Yeah. So how did that come about? So you had this career as an actor. It didn't maybe work out all the time. What was the next moment that kind of led you into your next phase of life?
Yeah, yeah, and I think one of the reasons it probably didn't work out is I mentioned ADHD earlier, and that one of the characteristics of that syndrome, or whatever, if you're having ADHD, is something called rejection sensitivity disorder. And all of us, to some extent, we don't like, being rejected and being told no, but there is some aspect to the neurobiology of somebody with ADHD that makes them hypersensitive to rejection. And obviously, as an actor, most of your life is spent being rejected because you go to audition and you're not right for the part. And you're taught at drama school, it's not personal, don't take it personally. There's a lot of moving parts in casting a film or a play. You might be too tall, you might be too short, you might not have the right kind of accent or whatever. But with hindsight, I wonder whether my ADHD did have a part to play with that. So I slid back into what was comfortable, which was the IT. Interestingly, though, I did find myself utilizing both passions at times in my acting career. So I remember I had one job. It was one of my first professional jobs, actually, at a repertory theatre company in the Highlands of Scotland, just the entryway to the Highlands of Scotland. And that actually started my love affair with Scotland. 2 decades later, my wife and I got married in Scotland, largely because of this experience. But I was employed as an acting stage manager at this theatre, and which meant that I was both on stage and backstage. But I also, because of who I am, I love making connections and building relationships, and just talking to people, whoever and wherever they are. And I developed a relationship with the person that was responsible for the box office at this theatre, and I recognized that they didn't have a really good system for keeping track of audience members and sort of following up with them, whatever. So anyway, I pitched the theatre on building a database for them, and they said, yeah, okay, yeah, great, do it, let's do it. So I then, in my downtime when I wasn't on stage or backstage, I developed, over a period of 6 months during this contract, I built this database for them, and yeah, that kind of supplemented my acting income at that time. So I kept my hand in with the computers. But anyway, long story short, I did slid back in, and I thought, well, if I'm not going to be an actor, if that's not going to work out, then what can I be? And I thought, well, I'm good in front of a crowd. I love IT, I love computers. What job combines those skills? So I just applied on spec to training companies, and actually got offered a job by 5 of them, I think, just on the strength of my speculative communication with them. I was going to say email, but I don't think it was email at the time. It was probably handwritten letters. So I started working for an IT training company, and it went really, really well. I don't know if that's the zag that you're thinking about. But anyway, that's what got me back onto the IT track. So I kind of zagged off the IT track, and now I'm zigging back onto the IT track, and that was the path that I found myself on then.
You said, you told me in the past that there was a realization with a a boss you had about things that
Oh
you.
yeah.
Mm.
I'm sorry. Thanks for the reminder. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I think you probably recognize, Rob, from the story that I said about the repertory theatre company, that there's whether it's an entrepreneurial bent or just an insight into problems and creating solutions for it. I'm not someone who's willing just to sit back and let things be. And I think it plays to this Clifton strengths that I have as a maximizer. A maximizer is somebody who sees something or someone and just intuitively knows that that could be quantumly better than it is, not interested in incremental improvements. So one of the things I found working for this IT training company, because of my training at college, I had a specialty in databases. I was the de facto database trainer for this company. And what I found time and time again is that I would be doing in-house training. So I would go into clients' premises and do the training with the business owners and their kind of admin staff or whatever. And what I found time and time again is that the business didn't so much require database training. They, like the Pitlochry Festival Theatre, actually needed a database. They needed a system in place to help them run their business more effectively. So that those kind of cogs started whirring, and I thought, well, maybe there's an opportunity here for the business that I'm employed by to do something about it. So I guess in the same way that I pitched the theatre, all those years before, I pitched my boss on me heading up a new division of this training company to develop databases for our clients rather than just being hired as trainers. That didn't I didn't say it didn't go well. It is like they weren't interested. They didn't see the opportunity in the way that I saw it. But that wasn't good enough for me. And I thought, well, if I thought there was good enough opportunity for me to go to my boss and pitch it to them, then it's a good enough opportunity, full stop. So I don't think it was the following day, but it was very quickly after that I handed in my resignation and I set up my first business to do exactly that, to build databases for clients. And then we kind of, this was kind of late 90s, so kind of 95, 96. The internet was this thing called the internet was starting to take off then. And we kind of were positioning it as online web-based databases to help businesses kind of operate more effectively. Yeah. So that kind of whole sort of systems database stuff was there fairly early on this zag back onto the IT line, if you like. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you're like an entrepreneur fire starter, and that taught you that you could make fire.
Indeed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting insight, and obviously you and I know each other very well. We go back half a decade ourselves. There is something in starting things, and again with a better understanding of my own neurodiversity, that the interest for people with ADHD is very much motivation for people with ADHD is very much interest based. And when something is new and novel, something doesn't exist, then you'll bring it into existence. That is incredibly motivating for somebody with ADHD. So this word activate that's in Activate Your Podcast is really, whenever I just have to hear that word, activate, start, get started. It really excites me. Follow through and carrying, I've learned to support myself and surround myself with people that have those strengths to complement my skills in seeing what can be great, activating, putting things in place to make that, to take those movements towards being great, and then obviously surrounding myself with people that can actually support that so things don't fall the cracks. But yeah, fire provided that being a fire starter is seen as a good thing and non-negative thing, then yeah, I do
Not an
like
arsonist,
starting. Yeah, no, I'm not an arsonist. No. Yeah, it's a great insight. Thanks, Rob. Yeah.
For the last 3 years, you've had very little to do with software, and that to me feels like another big change in direction. And you've been driving cars around the UK a lot. And I wondered if you could talk me through the origins of that more recent change.
Yeah, I'm happy to. As soon as you started speaking, I knew where you were going, and people can hear in my voice that it's stirred up emotions in me. I think partly because when I think back to that first company I started after the training company, I, hit the ground running like I do in everything that I start. And within the space of 3 years, ended up selling that company, which people just hearing those words will think, oh, great, you had a really great level of success with that first business. But the fact is that I sold that business for $1 because I ran it into the ground. Everything that I now know about business, about what to do, comes from learning what not to do in that first business. And they say that you learn more through the downtimes and the difficult times and the stuff when the times when things don't work out the way that you expect them to. That's when you learn. So when you asked me that question about what happened 3 years ago, I couldn't. There's a commonality, I guess, in that not that the business suffered, because actually after I left the business that I was CEO of at the time, we had developed some tech which quite shortly after I left ended up being acquired by a firm in Canada for a lot more than $1. So I had learned my lessons, if you like, and I had built a team, and we had developers in the Philippines and what have you. So I hadn't, I wasn't back at square one. I'd kind of gone up the spiral and learned a few things. But I guess the emotion comes from the fact that the vision that I had in my head when I started this thing wasn't the thing that came about. So back in the day after the IT training company, that business just dissolved. Ended up working for the company that bought it for $1. And this time, 3 years ago, because of what was going on with my mental health, I just walked away. I left the business to my two co-directors and walked away for the sake of my health more than anything else. And my wife, incredibly supportive. Obviously, we've been together 20 years this year, and wanted her Pete back, I guess. But alongside that, bills still need to be paid and the mortgage still needs to be covered. So she actually found me this job that I'm doing at the moment full time, to move luxury vehicles and other luxury cars and other vehicles around the UK. So I'll go to a dealer and pick up a brand new Range Rover that's been sold and drive it to the customer, and then pick up a post office van that's come to the end of its life and take it to the scrap heap and what have you. And it's been going back to what you mentioned earlier, Rob, about space. It instantly created space in my life. And as one of my favorite quotes, I drive my wife mad there with the quotes I come out with, and I'll say to her, what's my favorite quote? And when I ask her that, she normally says this one, is that nature abhors a vacuum. It was Aristotle. I don't know what the Greek is for it, but nature abhors a vacuum. And that is that when you create space, you have to create the space for that space to then be filled with something else. So my life slowed down dramatically. There was no customers, there was no tax man, there wasn't infighting with my co-directors, but we weren't on the same page as how we were going to grow the business. That all just went away. And so just spending my time just driving these lovely vehicles, and then also waiting for trains and buses to take me to the next job. And in all of that space, one of the things I kept coming back to was this 22-year-old Pete sitting on the top deck of a bus in Hong Kong, wondering what his life might be like if he went to drama school. And I just recognized that at my core, that it had been kind of hidden and kind of pressed down with the hamster wheel spinning of running a business, jumping in at the deep end like I always do, keeping on top of things. That this space allowed the real Pete. I mean, I've always been real, but kind of this thing that's at the core, this kind of inner gyro compass. I'm an artist. I'm a creator. I'm a storyteller. I'm an actor. And the producer part of it recognizes this activating strength that I have. That a producer gets things going. It's the producer of a film. It's the producer of a play. It's the producer of a podcast that actually makes things happen. So I'm an actor and a producer, and that kind of the space that driving gave me has now rejuvenated and activated in me this desire to create a space for other business owners to tell their real, authentic, vulnerable stories, so that they can not instantly but more quickly build trust with their ideal clients. Because there's one thing I know to be true in business, is that people buy from people they know, like and trust. All things being equal, people buy from people they know, like and trust. And the really interesting thing is that all things not being equal, people still buy from people they know, like and trust. And it's easy to know someone, it's harder to like some people, but it can be really, really difficult to trust people, certainly without any of the knowing. And in this day and age as well, that's so much driven by virtual connection and virtual communication, is how do we build trust with our ideal clients? Because without trust, there is no sale. There is no, I hate to use the word transaction, because I believe business should be relationship, not transactionally focused. But it's very difficult to take that step, that initial financial transaction that leads to that ongoing business relationship, without trust. And I'm just a firm, with the time that I've spent in cars and vehicles listening to podcasts, I'm just convinced that every business that has a service providing real value to solve real problems and pains in their clients' businesses should have a podcast as part of their overall digital assets in their business, for a whole lot of other reasons that is not interesting or relevant to talk about on this particular episode of Not a Straight Line. But that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I think trust is analog, not digital. And I think listening to a podcast really lets you hear someone's voice. And I think the reason that we've settled on it is because, even if you sell to people with very little time, they can listen in the car, at the gym. There is that sort of nice aspect to it. And what I've seen in my business is that when people get in contact with you, having listened to a certain number of episodes, it's a completely different conversation to someone who's just found me on LinkedIn, or perhaps even been referred and they just don't really know me that well yet.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And another example is a good friend of mine, a guy called Avon Collis. He's really big on YouTube, and I don't know if it's a podcast or just YouTube, but he was telling me the other day that he went into a client and it was almost like he was treated as royalty. It was like, because they'd been listening to his YouTube channel, his podcast, and it was like the sale he was sharing with us, the sale was almost or was done almost before he walked through the door. And another client of mine of Activate Your Podcast is a financial planner, very successful, turns over £1 million a year. He's got several financial planners underneath him, but he's getting to a point in his career where he doesn't want to be frontline with clients anymore. 3 hours to prepare for a meeting, 3 hours with clients, 3 or 4 hours writing up the notes afterwards, even with all of the back office support that he has now. So the podcast in his business allows him to be involved in a way in every single sales conversation that happens in his business without him having to actually be there. So now, before a dentist, he works with dentists that are about to have just sold or about to sell their practice. So now his sales process is that before a dentist can sit down with one of his financial planners, they have a process and a system that potential clients are encouraged to listen to, certainly the first 4 or 5 episodes of the podcast. What Activate Your Podcast does is create pillar episodes of the podcast, which kind of just in short 4 or 5 minute episodes tells the story of the business owner, of the company, who they serve, why they serve them, what problems and pains they deal with, the kind of common questions that customers have. So it kind of sets the scene. The dentists now, they sit down with one of this financial planner's advisors. They've got a sense of the company. They've got a feel of the vibe. They've got a really clear idea about whether this company is able to solve their problems. And the reason that the sales cycle is being shortened with them is because the trust level is higher now than it is just starting a conversation with nothing happening previously. I've kind of gone off on a tangent there, I think, possibly, but I'll leave it to you to bring me back, Rob.
Yeah, we'll just wrap up, I think. And I think, for most of the clients that I work with, it's easier for them to talk about what they do and talk through their story in conversation than it is to like go to a cafe and write it. And yes, they should probably have a book. Yes, a book might help them position them as the expert. But actually, out of talking through the material for your podcast, you will create other assets that can be used as social media posts, social media ads, book chapters. There's a lot of asset building in place. Here is the thing that I would add, and it's easier to talk through for most people than it is to write it.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is what we're recording now is a very, very, very special episode of Not a Straight Line, and it's only for the Relevate community. But for Not a Straight Line podcast, you and I, Rob, we sat down on Friday and we had a 2 hour conversation, a 2 hour version of this short 25-minute, half-hour conversation that we had. And out of that will come the pillar episodes of Not a Straight Line. So the first 4 or 5 episodes of the Not a Straight Line podcast will be pretty much what we've done our best to record here. And then the ongoing episodes will be me in deep dive conversations with business owners to kind of explore their own non-straight line journey, so that their episode on the Not a Straight Line podcast exists almost as a third party credibility reference against their own pillar episodes of their own podcast started by Activate Your Podcast. And again, like you said, Rob, the digital assets that come out of that exploration of a business owner's non-straight line journey will create 6 months worth of LinkedIn posts and Twitter threads and conversation starters, with the quotes and the sound bites and the insights that come from talking through your story with somebody like me who is just innately curious about what makes people tick and why they tick and who they are ultimately. And that's really the questions that potential clients are asking themselves as well. Is like, who is this person? Can I really trust them to help me and the problems that I have in my own business? So yeah.
Just for anyone in the Relevate community listening, you've got a few slots coming up, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. So I'm, as much as I love driving luxury cars around the UK, next week I am taking off driving completely. I've got, well, as many slots as possible, no more than 3 a day. So I've got 15 slots next week to record episodes of there's Not a Straight Line podcast with business owners. 2 of them are already taken. Does anyone on the call know Ed Dale, Melbourne?
Yep.
Ed, the Kim's, Kim, yeah. So Ed will be on the podcast. He's open for me having a deep dive with him about his non-straight line journey. Yeah, so I'd love to have a chat with anyone on the call who thinks that their non-straight line journey will help them build trust with their ideal clients. Yeah. So just, I don't know, message me in the Relevate community, probably the easiest way. It's in one place then. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So thank you. Yeah. So thank you and stay tuned for the next episode. Don't know who's going to be on it, but we'll take it from there. Thanks, Avon.
No worries. Thank you very much. That was
okay, sorry. There was just one more thing. So Paul, you jumped the gun. I was right at the beginning. I was going to put up another poll, but I thought it was a little bit too cheesy, even for me. Can you believe that? Even I thought that something was too cheesy. But what I will do is I will encourage you just to reflect internally about the answer that you gave on that first poll between 1 and 9. Whether if I was to put up that poll again, whether you would score at a higher level as a result of having listened to this podcast episode. Yeah, that's all I'll put out there.
Fantastic. Well, I think for me, that's a resounding yes.
May I just add on to that, if I may, Pete?
Mm-hmm.
So I've found, well, first of all, thank you so much for just sharing your journey. I kind of went down that line a little bit myself. Avon mentioned that I'd previously also been a radio announcer, which I have. And it was a dream and something I wanted to follow. This is years ago, by the way. And I did, and I hated it. And I hated it full time. So I literally stayed as a full-time radio announcer for about a week or 2 weeks. And I went back to my old job, which in those days was as an accountant. And then about a month or two later, the radio station rang me and said, look, we know you don't want to do this full-time, but would you be interested in doing part-time? Which I did. And I went back and did it for a number of years. And I really enjoyed that. In my case, and I'm wondering if you're a little bit the same, it was a change in mindset, starting out as a radio announcer, working midnight to dawn in a room on your studio on your own, literally nobody else in the building. Really didn't have a lot of appeal, but I had this dream initially that was wrong. And I found that helpful to have tried it and realized it wasn't what I wanted to do. But when I went back and did it part-time, I loved it. Totally different outlook. One of my questions of you is, did you have something similar with the acting? And do you still get the opportunity to do the acting?
Yeah, it's a great insight, Paul, and I think you're absolutely right. So you go to drama school and you come out and you've got stars in your eyes or the equivalent. And I was fortunate to get an agent to pick me up at the showcase we did at the end of the year. So I thought I was off the races. I thought, this is it. I'm set now. But the reality turned out to be different to what I thought, and possibly because of the ADHD, and also probably because I just didn't have the maturity, the wisdom, the mental strength and resilience to stick at it. I fell back to what was comfortable. But now I know, now my kind of internal gyro compass has kind of brought me back to, who I am at my core. I can borrow from my experience of previously, and also the entrepreneurial experience I've had subsequently, and go into my acting career now knowing that if it's to be, then it's up to me. So I'm taking responsibility. I'm producing my own stuff. I shot my first film last year. I was a lead in a film. I produced that. That's in post-production at the moment. So I'm not relying on other people to kind of just anoint me and say, yes, we want you in our production. I'm in the process of getting an agent at the moment, and I will be put up for stuff that is suitable for my brand, for my acting brand, but I'm not relying on it. I'm taking control of that aspect of my career.
Your story also gave me a smile about my own life, and at the time I went moving from accounting into radio announcing. I was engaged, and we hadn't been engaged for too long. And I remember ringing my fiance, as she was then, and said, look, we have to catch up at lunchtime. And I explained to her that this opportunity had come my way. I'd been offered this role. And I explained that, look, it's working midnight to dawn, only 6 days a week, and also only a drop of salary of 40%. What do you think? And so for me, and I suspect you're the same, and that's really what I'm trying to draw out here, I would have been so disappointed if I didn't try it. And I think you're possibly the same. Do you want to give us any comments there?
I'd love to, but I also am conscious of the time, and that Avon's probably got things that he wants to kind of wrap things up. Maybe we should have a chat for the Not a Straight Line Journey podcast, Paul, and in that conversation you can ask me some questions as well.
You should do that, Paul. I'll watch out.
What have I got myself into?
Well, I was going to say we've got a hand raised from Tom, so we might just give a couple other people a chance to ask a question, and then we'll roll into a wrap up. So go, Tom.
Just to educate me, Pete, podcasts are audio and video, and to utilise your service, if you had packages, whatever it might be, 15 podcasts, what would be a ballpark figure?
It's a great question. So nowadays, pod can be video and audio. As a huge podcast in the I was going to say in the UK, but podcasts are global. Is anyone familiar with Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO? You come across that? Yeah, exactly. So that's like he's got a full production team that manages the video recording as well as the audio recording of those podcasts. The Activate Your Podcast service specifically is just audio. There are too many moving parts to also bring in editing video alongside. That's not to say that in the fullness of time, the business owner can't add in video themselves, but they Activate Your Podcast, and that service, just to be clear, is the creation of these pillar episodes, the foundational episodes of your podcast are what come out of Activate Your Podcast. And for some of my clients, that will be all they do. They want to have their story told. They want to have it out there in a form that makes it accessible for potential clients to build trust with them before they start a sales conversation. Other clients of Activate Your Podcast use the pillar episodes that come out of Activate Your Podcast to then go on to do either interview style podcasts like Rob and I have just done now, or however they want their podcast to go. That's beyond the scope of Activate Your Podcast. Remember what I said is I get things started, I don't carry things on. But obviously, collaborating with people like Matthew and Rob, there's resources and skills accessible to Activate Your Podcast clients to then go on and do their own podcast. In terms of cost, I dropped $6,000 Australian dollars. That is the cost of the pillar episodes, and that'll be the cost once I've come out of beta. So I'm in beta mode at the moment, and there are 6 beta slots for Activate Your Podcast at the end of June, and they're going for half that. Just while Rob, Matthew, and I get clear on the systems and the processes and whatever to go from new client to their pillar episodes of their podcast being live. And that involves getting the artwork done, getting the posting sorted. We've got to make sure that the business owner has the appropriate, Kane, I'm looking at you, has got the appropriate mic. They're not just using a wireless thing. So we'll exactly. So we'll actually buy and send the business owner a appropriate professional quality mic if they don't have one themselves. Yeah, so there's 6 slots available at the end of June just to help us get through this beta phase, and then after that it'll be 6,000 Australian dollars per whatever. Running out of words. I've talked too much.
It's meant to be like an easy process as well. Like mostly what you're required to do is speak to me, and then Matt does a lot of the techie stuff that people are confused by. And so it's meant to just be you do you talk, you share your story, you share what you know, basically. And that's
so you show up for 2 hours.
$6,000. Is it like so many 30-minute podcasts, or just one, or 10?
So what comes out of an Activate Your Podcast session? So you as a business owner, as Rob said, you just show up on the allotted time. You have a 2-hour conversation, and up to a 2-hour conversation with Rob, and from that we create the pillar episodes of your podcast. We use Rob's storytelling skills to basically create the first few episodes of your podcast to tell an engaging story. That there is a story narrative across the first few episodes of your new podcast, which tells a story of you, your business, your customers, the problems they have, and the reason why past customers have used you to solve their problems. And for that, those episodes are 4 or 5 minutes long each, and there's 4 or 5 of them. So the end result is like half an hour of podcast material split over 4 or 5 episodes, just to make it really easy for potential clients to engage, to listen, and to build that trust with you, ready to have that sales conversation. Yeah.
Which then becomes a salesperson that never sleeps.
Which then becomes a salesman that never sleeps, and also becomes a generous giver of digital marketing assets for other parts of your business. The insight, Rob said, it can be easier for people. It's often easier for people to talk through their story than it is to write it. I can guarantee you, because I've had firsthand experience of it, you sit down with Rob and you start talking about your story, you will remember things that you thought you'd forgotten. And even if you'd remember them, you thought you might think would not be relevant or useful or interesting to potential clients. And I guarantee you that when they come out of you, they're the things that make those quantum leaps in trust. Like when Rob asked me that question, which took me to a place of strong emotion in terms of thinking about the breakdown. My separation from my first company and the separation from the company that I most recently had. That it was difficult to think on that and reflect on that. But those are the things which really form those strong ties with your listener, and your potential clients.
All right. Well, I think we might. We got one last comment from Kim, and then we'll close it down.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good. Thanks for that, guys. Saying that maybe half a dozen episodes come out of one project. How are you going to, or how is the client going to build an audience around these episodes? No point in creating episodes if no one's going to be watching them or listening.
It's a great question, and one of the prerequisites, barriers of entry, criteria, or whatever, is that the potential client of Activate Your Podcast must be spending money on marketing, either internally or with an external company, because the point is that investing in getting the audio assets done with Activate Your Podcast, they can then be created. They can then be repurposed as assets to give to a marketing team, either an internal or an external outsourced marketing team, to then use to, make LinkedIn posts or to market. So we're very, very clearly sticking to our lane. We're storytellers. We are podcast hosts, experienced interviewers, incredibly talented audio engineers, that we will do the heavy lifting to get out of you your compelling story and put it together in a way that will keep an ideal client engaged for 25 or 30 minutes. They will get to the end of the first episode and they will want to binge listen to the end of your pillar episodes because of the way we put it together. But it's on you as a business owner to already be making investments in your business to be able to take those audio assets and utilize them most effectively. But it's a great question, Kim. Thanks for asking. So they need to use people like you, like Ross, to maximize the effectiveness of making the investment. So maybe we should talk probably about collaboration. Maybe if you have clients that you're struggling to get content out of so that you can do their business growth stuff, just tell them they need to start a podcast to give you the material to actually help them grow. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, we might pull stumps there. Thank you very much. That was fantastic. I've learned more about Pete in the last 20 minutes than I have in the last 20 months or however long we've known each other, or more, 3-4 years, something like that. So, and well done, Rob. That was excellent questioning. So I think that was very intriguing, and most people are probably more engaged with that than some of the other knowledge transfer sessions we've had. So definitely good to sort of, I guess, bare your soul to all of us. So we really appreciate that, and this is definitely a safe space to do that. So it's no small thing to like bare your emotions. So particularly as a rough, tough, brash male. So well done.
But I'm an actor, Danny. I'm used to it. That's what I do. But you're right. You're right. We do, and that's part of it. Is just creating that safe space. Again, coming back to this word that Rob used. Yeah.
Well, actors' emotions are other people's emotions. These were your own, so it's a little bit more close to the bone.
These were my own. Yeah. Thanks, Avon. Appreciate that.
No worries. Well, thank you everybody for a lovely evening.